Okay, so for the intro, yeah, just tell us about yourself, Tom. We just had a great conversation with your friend Chris. He introduced us. I know you're a magic content creator, you're a dad, you have a son who's about 5 years old. You live in the same area with Hollyander, Jason. They've been on previous episodes. You created a podcast, 150 episodes over 3 years. So that would have been one episode every week, 52 weeks in a year. So that was pretty consistent. Um, I'm doing like one conversation a day, but only 3 episodes a week. So I have to figure out how to edit it all in time. And
Yeah, the
yeah,
editing definitely like
bottleneck.
was the backbreaker trying to
Mhm,
do all of that and keep like a regular clockwork schedule of like
mhm,
recording, editing, getting it out.
yeah,
And then having it like I used to have an awesome time
mhm,
playing games and traveling and doing all of these things for the games that I played in the companies that I used to work for.
mhm,
But having a kid really centers you,
mhm,
and the time that you think that you have is gone when you
mhm,
have a kid. I really used to think like, wow, I'm so busy. I have all these things going on. I don't know how I'm handling this.
mhm,
And then I had a kid. I'm like, oh, I had no idea what it was really like.
mhm.
So that's where I am now. Like the podcast had a good run, and it's a lot of work to keep up with all of that. So
Mhm.
congratulations to you for doing one of these every day, and then trying to get out 3 episodes a week. That's a lot of work.
And I had a really good day just a few days ago. I interviewed my cousin, and the same day I edited it, made the thumbnail, and launched the episode. And I'm like, okay, if I can do one of these every day, the full workflow pipeline, I will never go to bed with regrets. Like that would be a great life if I can figure that out.
Yeah, I think that the time. So when I started doing it at the beginning,
Hmm.
there was this rush of excitement. There was this like learning curve. There was this like, oh, I'm making progress. This is great.
Hmm.
And then 3 years of doing that, like things. I don't know. Maybe it was my perception that changed. Maybe it was just like my life obviously changed.
Hmm.
Um, but it's hard to stay consistent. That's the thing.
Yes.
It's not hard to like have that burst where you start off where you're
Yep.
like, oh, I'm gonna eat healthy and lose weight. I'm like go
Hmm.
to the gym every day, and you're like, yeah, I'm doing it. And then 3 or 4 days into it,
Hmm.
you start to get tired. You take a day off. Like that. That's the big drawback. It's the
Yes.
grind,
And it's happening
not
to me
the.
right now. I can see that. Like even though I love what I'm doing, I can tell
Yep.
that there are it's difficult to keep the consistency. Things get in the way or my mindset changes. And I think it was Bruce Lee who said something like long-term persistence trumps short-term intensity.
I feel like that's a really good quote, and if it is Bruce Lee, that's great. But it's yeah, it's hard.
I
It's
don't know
hard.
how
It's
to do
like
that because I have this pattern of short-term intensity all the time in my life, but never long-term persistence.
I absolutely haven't figured it out.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's a lot of people that are in that boat
Hmm.
where you get the idea to do something and you're super motivated and you're excited about it. And as soon as that sort of like dopamine burst of excitement wears off
Hmm.
and you stop getting that sort of reinforcement from your brain
Yeah.
and it's not new anymore,
Yeah.
then what how much you think you want it changes. I think that's
Yes.
true for a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. And I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD. My mom took me to BC Children's Hospital. I'm still not sure I have it because they use like a correlative fMRI scan kind of thing. They didn't do it off the DSM-5. Um,
Hmm.
it seemed a little pseudoscientific when I'm looking back now at the results. But if it is true, and with what I've learned about ADHD, it might be that my brain is craving the stimulation from new information, from new learning, from new things. But I think that's why I'm able to do one conversation a day quite easily because every conversation is unpredictable. You cannot predict a human being or a human conversation, even with a friend of 20 years, right?
It's true. I had no idea where the conversation with Chris was going to go
Yeah.
when we started it, and I do like not to dump on uh like early childhood ADHD diagnoses because I'm sure a lot of them are very legitimate, but it does seem like a lot of it is like not pseudoscience, but like if your kid
Overzealous
can't sit
diagnosis.
still in elementary school,
Yep.
then a lot of the time, maybe not right now, because I think they're trying to cut back on the
It's happening
diagnoses,
right
but
now,
like
but yeah, I'll tell you after.
10, 15 years ago,
Yep.
it was just like, all right, ADHD, like what can we do?
Yep.
And they're giving 7-year-old children that
Yep.
just want to run around and have fun, like Ritalin, so they can just be like vegetative in a classroom. I think it's kind of bullshit.
Could I
But
rant about this for a minute?
yeah,
Because
no, go for it.
this is a
Because I
topic I'm
teach.
super passionate about.
Yeah, yeah, go.
Okay, so one person I met in New World, similar to Hollyander time, a few months before that, he was telling me about his sister. He's in Germany, or no, he lives in the U.S. Maybe his sister's in Germany, but he was talking about his sister's child, basically his nephew, who was being medicated, and he was arguing with his sister, saying like, he's just a kid. Kids have energy. They like, and they found that people with ADHD, kids with ADHD, can actually pay a lot of attention to things when they like what they're doing. So I'm like, okay, that's an easy solution. Find stuff you like, because life, that's the journey of life, right? Find things you like to do, productive things you like. Why else would you, why would you want to force yourself to do something you really hate, like sit in a classroom and listen to boring teachers? And so that's happening today. I also had a podcast guest on for episode 12, Alex. He's 23 years old, and he was actually on Concerta, which is apparently a long release ADHD treatment drug. And his grades were terrible. He didn't like school, he didn't do well in school. And when he actually went off the drugs, he started excelling academically. And he realized that he could learn and that he could focus and that he could be good at things. And now he's almost like getting, his goal is to get to masters in League of Legends. He runs a successful real estate business. He's a landlord. He likes what he does. He knows how to work with his mind. He doesn't take any medication anymore. So that's great, right? And I just feel like, yeah, there's so many horror stories. It just feels like when JFK, okay, this is the 1 to 35 thing that's gonna happen
Right.
here, which is the big leap. But it feels like when JFK lobotomized his sister to get her to sit still. Like basically, she was too disruptive, too hysterical, hysteria. Um, and then he was glad that she was now more docile and demure, but she had lost most of her brain or a bunch of her brain, so she was no longer that person. Which I think we do that to kids, but it's on a smaller scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of that's one of the automatic go-tos in elementary school. Now I teach high school. I'm not fully sure what happens in elementary school except for what's happening with my child. But
Hmm.
I do feel like when kids aren't performing academically and they don't have that attention span, one of the first sort of hurdles that that the kid has to face is like they get referred to testing, and
Hmm.
then it almost always comes back ADHD because like what are the classroom based symptoms of ADHD? They're like, oh, they're fidgeting, they're not focusing,
Hmm.
they're all of those things that you see an unengaged student doing,
Hmm.
and like they might not have ADHD, they might just like they might legitimately not like your class and how
Yep.
you teach. And
Exactly.
it's really hard for a second or third or first grader to advocate for themselves
Yep.
to be like, listen, like I think you're kind of a boring teacher and I don't enjoy learning from you and about these things. Like they
Yep.
don't have the ability to be able to self-advocate for themselves.
Yep.
So it's a spot where you see a lot of parents stepping in and saying like we're not accepting this, we're going to go for alternatives, or like
Hmm.
obviously there are people that legitimately have ADHD, um
Yep.
but I think the number of people who we have on the books in elementary school being prescribed ADHD meds is far higher than the students that actually have ADHD.
It's
And I think
inflated.
that's
Yeah.
a cultural artifact where you look at
Yep.
I don't want to bring up European countries that have different different social structures than us, but you see ADHD diagnoses in some of those countries, and they're like close to zero
Hmm.
because they structure their elementary schools different, where the kids are outside like 3 hours a day, and they come back in, and they're like their teachers are paid more, and their learning styles more engaged. Like
Yep.
it's it's different, and the fact that their school structure different
Yep.
completely eliminate or almost eliminates ADHD diagnoses is like telling for the American school system. And I know Canada is similar. You guys can like, you know what I'm saying? It's similar. Um but it's not what it should be like for sure.
It's not. And I remember even in high school, I was advocating for the Finnish system or the Danish system, one of them, where they didn't give kids homework. They didn't believe in homework. They were like, look, you
Mm.
can learn in class and then you can you know, and they
Yeah,
even had a
okay.
different way of testing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like there are many different ways that you can like think about that,
Hmm.
but I do think like homework related, especially for high school,
Hmm.
it's the ability it's not what you're learning when you're doing the homework in my mind.
Okay.
It's the ability that you learn to budget and structure your time outside of school to get the things done that you need to get done that's really important.
Hmm.
I feel like homework is more of a time management and self-regulation practice than anything else.
Okay.
Where if you're a good student and you see that you have homework from a class, you need to be able to like look at it and say, all right, how long do I think this is going to take me? Is
Hmm.
this something that I need to plan time for? Is this going to be challenging for
Just
me?
like project
Can I do
management.
it?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's, I feel like those are very important skills to learn.
Yes.
And if you say, all right, the school system is going to only teach and evaluate during the school day, and then you sort of forget about it, you go off, you run around, you have a great day,
Hmm.
and then you get into the job market.
Yep.
And obviously I feel like education is a huge preparer for the job market,
Hmm.
and your boss is like, no, I know it's Friday, but like this isn't done, and these are the assignments that you have for the weekend, and you're like, I don't do that. Like, I
Hmm.
don't do homework. You might have to do something that you don't have the practice in
Or if you're
doing.
running your own business, you don't get to, you know, it's something needs
Yeah,
to
I
get
mean,
done,
I mean, I
right?
guess if
Yeah.
you're running your own business, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have the shut off button. And I feel like entrepreneurs and people that are doing that, you understand that
Hmm.
you can't do that. You want to be successful.
You need
Like
results.
you yeah, you are on the grind. You are going to get that done.
Yeah.
But it's more I don't want to say the education system is preparing the average worker,
Hmm.
but that's sort of like what we've set up our education system to do.
It's a
Like
system from
you
Prague.
separate the high
Yeah.
performers and you like push them ahead, and then everybody else is like, hey, you get this, and
Yeah.
you don't get upset. So
Hmm. Man, okay, so many thoughts. One of them is Jason would probably like to hear this because he talked about how he didn't like doing homework because he didn't see why he should do the same math problem 50 times when he got it after 2 times, you know? Um, but this idea of taking your work, like knowing how to work outside of a structured environment. But it's weird because many adults do not know how to work outside of an office. They have to go to the office to work. So like sometimes when I did homework, I would do it at school, you know? I would do it at the end of class or I would do it after school or whatever it is. Because going home, it's like a whole bunch of distractions are there. My parents will ask me what I want for dinner, how is school, and all that. I'll play video games like League of Legends instead of doing homework and stuff. So it makes sense, right? And that's what people started to struggle now with COVID, working from home, distractions and other things.
yeah, I 100% envied any of my programmer tech friends that had remote work jobs. They would just like
Yep.
go down to the basement and they have their server set up and they'd like do what they needed to do
Yep.
and like not have to do a commute,
Yep.
save time, and they just be there. And I was like, I want that so badly,
Hmm.
but I teach like it's social. Like that wasn't a thing until COVID happened,
Yep.
and like right when it happened, I was like, yeah, like this is gonna be great. In 3 or 4 weeks, especially 3 or 4 months into it,
Hmm.
I was like, this is the worst. I never want to work remotely in this job again.
Hmm.
I need that social interaction. I need separation of like work and home life. I need like I need the ability to be able to transition from being at home to going to work.
Hmm.
Like I used to think that commute was just a waste of time, that it didn't really need to happen.
Hmm.
And then going through remote work at home with COVID, the I love my commute. I get to go from being at home and then like gradually transition into being like the work person I am. And then when it's done, you get that like that toned down time where when your commute's done, you're home.
Hmm.
And obviously I wouldn't want to commute like 2 hours or 3 hours a day for work,
Hmm.
but having a 20-minute commute is beautiful just to like
It's a transition
set
period.
set the
Yeah.
transition period and set the boundaries of when you're like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
And
My
I
mind
don't
is off work. Yeah.
yeah.
But I've heard a
Yep.
lot of teachers get kind of, well, abused is the wrong word, but let's say they get pressured to take their work home with them, to grade tests at home, to grade papers at home, to do a lot of extra work, and they don't get paid that well for it. There's no overtime, There's a lot of problems. How long have you been a high school teacher, by the way? I didn't think high school teacher would be your profession based on everything else you've done.
I know. Well, listen, this is the teenage things that we talked about before, but
Yeah.
I have been a teacher for
Wow.
almost 20 years now.
So since you
Eight,
were 20,
18, 18 and a half.
okay,
Yeah.
18.5, and you're 42 now, so that's like
Yeah.
24 years old. 24.5,
Yep.
23.5. Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Um,
So
I
straight
love
out
it.
of university, you started being a high school teacher?
So I worked for the game company for a little bit in the transition because like
Hmm.
in reality, when I was going to school, like I love playing games.
Yeah.
And the game company that I loved growing up, like Wizards of the Coast,
Hmm.
Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, like
Everything.
Pokemon, the card game when it came out,
Yeah.
I got a job with them, and it was my,
Dream job?
I mean, like in my mind, right? It was my dream job. I was like,
But in
I love
reality,
doing.
yeah.
But I mean, in reality, it was like $15 an hour, no benefits to be like in like retail management for the company.
Right.
And even though at the time I loved doing it, and I was 22 and I was having a great time,
Yeah.
that's not like that's not what you want to do when you're 40. You know what I mean? Um, and I had a sort of very strong academic background,
Hmm.
and wasn't planning on teaching high school.
Hmm.
My original goal, or my original like why I went to school
Hmm.
was to be a college physics professor. Like
Yeah.
had an amazing physics teacher in high school, and that's what I originally declared my major in. And then really understood that I liked the subject, but it was more that teacher in that class that I loved
Hmm.
rather than the actual material.
Yeah.
And by the time that I figured out that that might not be the direction I wanted to go, like I don't want to get a PhD in physics.
Hmm.
Um, I just had a degree,
Hmm.
um,
What was this, like
and
a bachelor's in just general science, or is it?
no, so I when I figured out I didn't want to go on in physics, I switched my major to math because
Okay.
you think about um, the background that you need
Yeah.
for college physics. There's a lot of math,
Yep.
um, and ended up like just cramming a semester of 6 math classes
Hmm.
and graduating with my math degree,
And do you
and
enjoy
then
math?
oh, I love it.
Okay.
So that's what I teach,
Hmm.
my math and finance, and
Math and finance. Okay.
I love how, and this sort of all ties together to games, the strategic thinking and problem solving that I learned growing up just playing games
Hmm.
directly applied to math. It's
Hmm.
like what are the algorithms? What's the big picture, sort of the strategy versus tactics of chess or whatever?
Hmm.
It all seemed very, very structured to me.
Hmm.
And there's a ton of branches of math that I feel like just so directly apply to your daily real life.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about like, oh, you need to know addition because of budgeting and your financial management
You're
in the
talking
future, but
complex
like,
math and like visualizing conceptual understanding to help in life decision making, right?
yeah, so
Yep.
like game theory and
Hmm.
decision making and statistics and probability and like
Yep.
trying to trying to show, listen, these things are actually what your life is about. Your life is about the decisions you make and the trees that branch off in the future. And I know that there's a lot more to it,
Hmm.
but if you can take this math and apply it to your everyday decision making, in the long run, your life is going to be better.
Hmm.
And if you think about it that way, like things will be easier for you.
Hmm.
Um, I I love teaching math for that fact.
Hmm.
I think high school, there's some classes I teach where like
Yep.
it's a little lost where
Hmm.
I'm doing like test prep stuff and I'm really trying to like help kids with the basics and that's what I get paid for, right? Um but I have some higher level classes where like I really get into that
Hmm.
and it's wonderful. Like I legitimately love teaching that.
Do you teach AP math?
Yeah, I teach AP stats.
Okay.
I also have a college marketing class where like our school partners with a local college and the kids get college credit for it. It's like straight syllabus from the college that we're partnered with.
Mm-hmm.
and I really enjoy that class. I also got to write my own curriculum
Mm-hmm.
for a sort of like general financial literacy class,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved it. And I got to break every rule of teaching where like you're handed a curriculum and you're like, all right, teach this.
Mm-hmm.
Where the teacher who used to teach the class taught from like a 1970s workbook, and I was like, this isn't gonna work for me.
Yeah, it's
And
40
I
years in the
wrote,
future.
yeah, I mean, it was gross. I was like, I get why nobody's taking this class.
Mm-hmm.
And I structured the curriculum from September to June of what I wish I knew when I graduated high school.
Yep.
What are the hooks for kids that they're going to need to know in the future? We talked about the basics like budgeting and career choice, and sort of like edged career choice and job training into talking about supply and demand in the markets, and like really got kids hooked into that, to where when I started teaching it, I think there were 12 kids that had signed up for the class.
Mm-hmm.
3 years later, I had brought two groups of kids to Washington D.C. that won some SIFMA award,
Mm-hmm.
and there were 180 kids signed up for the class, and it was awesome. And then I sort of got moved up with the classes I was teaching and had to drop that, but I miss teaching that class every day. Like, you could actually walk in to the kids and say, none of what I'm going to teach you is bullshit. And everything that I'm going to spend time actually showing you is going to be applicable to your real life. And the kids believed it because it was. Like, you walk into a chemistry class and like your teacher can say that. Or you walk into an algebra 2 class and your teacher can say that, but like nobody believes it. You're like, I don't get it. But in that class, it was everything,
And that's
and
because you
it
built
was
the
great.
curriculum yourself.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like there has to be a connection between the teacher and the content they're delivering.
Yes.
And if you don't identify with a topic personally, it's really hard for you to teach it with a passion.
Mm-hmm.
So because I got to write it, and because I got to do that, it it made me more energetic. The kids were like, "Wow, I really like this class,"
Mm-hmm.
to the point where like that there was a kid who's working for Fidelity
Mm-hmm.
that emailed the school the other day, and they're like, "I hope Mr. X is still teaching that class."
Yeah.
And it's crazy to get emails 10, 15 years later from kids I had in the class that are like, "Listen, like, here's where I'm at, and I really feel like it's a lot of what I learned in your class got me there."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look at Jason. They're retired in their 40s. You know, they're financially independent, financially free. And you'll probably have a student email and go like, you know, your class is a big reason why I don't have to work at age 45 or whatever, right? That could
Yeah,
happen,
I mean, I only taught the class for like 3 years,
right? But
and I
180
got
people,
yeah, no, it blew
more.
like
Yeah.
it was it was the most popular class in the school,
Mm-hmm.
and I love teaching it.
Yep.
Um, and as soon as that sort of happened, it was like kind of like a big publicity thing
Mm-hmm.
where that's when I got my AP class. That's when I got like the sort of other higher level classes
Mm-hmm.
where usually teachers in a big district, especially urban districts, I teach in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you come in first year, you're given sort of a lot of like the lower level classes, more challenging kids to deal with, lower level content, because they don't want to take a new person that sort of isn't proven and have them teach the higher level content, because they're like, you need to prove that you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those sort of prove it classes, and then my schedule changed.
It makes sense. I mean, you basically, through competency, showed that not only did you care, but you could get effective results in practice, which is a very hard thing to measure in almost every profession. Um, and what you did that's so interesting to me is also you applied marketing. Like you even used the word hooks, right? That's a
Oh,
term
you
for
have to like
yeah.
I maybe this is just me going off about teaching, but I feel like there's two things you need to be really good at
Mm-hmm.
to be a good, effective teacher.
Yep.
And honestly, in my mind, the content for most high school classes, it's not the content. Like, I feel like I could walk into a history class or a science class
Yep.
or whatever, a tech class, and be an effective teacher. Because you take a look at like what kids are learning in high school, and any high school graduate, like you did that before.
Yep.
And if you're smart enough, you should be able to figure out what you're teaching the kids. I know you have more content knowledge, you know where that all bridges to in the future, and everything's great with that.
Mhm.
But I don't feel like content knowledge is a drawback to being a teacher. It's student engagement. And the way to do that, in my mind, is to be a really good storyteller.
Mhm.
Like, you need to be able to have 35 kids in a room, and you need to be the presence, not like the put your phone down, stop talking. You can't, you just can't do that. You
No,
can't
you
like
can't force. No,
micromanage it.
imagine if you are such a good storyteller that they prefer looking at you and listening to you over looking at their phones.
That
That's how you
that's
get people to put down their phones.
that's the deal.
Because if you
And
take the
I can't.
shortcut and berate them, you destroy the effectiveness of that class, and you trade long-term trust for short-term attention, which is exactly the wrong thing to do if you're a good marketer.
I I can't do that in all my classes.
Hmm.
Like, I I can do it in a few,
Hmm.
and you always try to do it, and the ones that you can do, the ones that you can get the kids, like, sucked in and hooked,
Hmm.
those are the classes that are gonna be, like, your great classes through the year.
Hmm.
And it's always a random group of kids, and you can't connect with everybody. You do your best to try, but there's always certain groups of kids where like you know that what you're trying to do isn't working, and you have to micro police it a little more. There's
Hmm.
certain kids you have to spend more attention to, but that that's how it is.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like if you were to figure out what class you wanted to go to,
Hmm.
right? The class that you wanted to go to would be classes that you cared about the material, that you enjoyed the classroom environment that the teacher set up,
Hmm.
and that you generally like enjoyed how the teacher taught, and like respected the craft or whatever it is. And if you can't do that, things get really really hard and really really grindy, and that like I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that as my job. I don't want to be the person that like has to police everybody, because one, it's not my personality, and two, like I don't get paid enough to, for my main job to be to deal with that.
Hmm.
So I try to make it as engaging as I can.
Yeah, and it's you're doing it for yourself too. Like because nobody likes being the mean teacher. Nobody necessarily. Well, some people do, Matilda and all that. But um, yeah, it's definitely more enjoyable when it's a mutually collaborative thing, and you can tell that they like what they're learning. Then you know you're doing your job right. Otherwise, it kind of feels like, and I'm guessing a lot of your fulfillment as a teacher comes from those emails, right? Seeing those results. I'm just wondering, like, how do you deal with all the bullshit that comes with being a high school teacher, right? Like all the politics, the
Mhm.
low pay, the problems, the pressure.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm from like the Boston area,
Hmm.
and countrywide for the US, like there's a lot of talk worldwide about like, ah, being a teacher in the US is like is awful,
Hmm.
is all this. Massachusetts teachers, especially Massachusetts veteran teachers, like financially do well enough.
Hmm.
Now, if I took my MS in math and my my science background
Hmm.
and was in the private sector from when I was like of job market age, I'd probably be doing much better financially now. But
Hmm.
I mean, like, we're a profession that still has a pension. We have time off for our families.
Hmm.
The vacation schedule is like, it's really nice.
Because you get summers off
And
like kids do, right?
yeah, I mean, it's the perfect schedule for a parent.
Yep.
And when you take a look at all of those things, it's it's not that I'm saying that other teachers in the US aren't having as bad of a time as they're saying,
Hmm.
but like, let's take Arizona. Arizona waived the bachelor's requirement for teachers. Their average teacher salary is somewhere in the 30s. Like, that's not what it's like to be a professional teacher in Massachusetts. It's
Hmm.
just not,
So every
especially
state is
one.
different. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So state laws, state certifications, educational requirements for what you need to be a teacher are different in each state.
Hmm.
Like Massachusetts requires you to have a master's in a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Now, not every teacher in Massachusetts has one. You have a timeline to get there. Some people stop teaching before that. But if you have been a teacher in a district in Massachusetts for 20 years, you're not you're not close to making $30,000 a year. It's not like that. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, the extra stuff, the grading and the lesson planning and all of that you have to do, um, it's really front loaded work. When you start teaching, it's tough
Hmm.
because you don't have any background to build all of that stuff from.
Hmm.
But every year that you teach a class, like I've taught Algebra 2 for 18 years,
Hmm.
the amount that you have to do to prep for that class, it just exponentially drops off.
You become
And
better
the
at it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can go through from September to June and tell you exactly everything that we're going to do in Algebra 2 in order,
Hmm.
and it's just burned into my memory from teaching it for that long.
Hmm.
And I feel like grading, especially for math, it's way less time consuming than English or history.
Hmm.
Like, if I had to read 150 students 4-page papers, I would have a very bad time. But if I have to grade 200 kids math quizzes, I can be done in 30 seconds a quiz because it's like efficient, it's algorithm based, and that's it. Um, so I don't feel pressured by a lot of the things that that teachers say about the profession because I spend minimal time outside of school now that I'm X amount of years in,
Hmm.
and I'm not doing a ton outside. So that's just the spot that I'm in, and I'm really lucky.
And you like what you're doing. And I guess you even counteracted the lack of autonomy by by having that opportunity to develop your own curriculum and then leaning into it and then getting your AP classes and so on. Because it seems to me like you first of all, you take responsibility for the problems in your life or the shortcomings. You find ways to overcome them. And second, you really jump on the opportunities that show up and you completely prove yourself in them. You don't just half ass it.
Yeah, well, I think like one, I've been really, really lucky in my life. Like
Yeah.
things things could have taken some bad turns at some point for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but I also feel like, and uh, I don't want to seem like cocky. Um, but I feel like for the average teacher, at least the average teacher that I teach with,
Hmm.
um, Title One school, the average teacher at my school has like 3 years of experience. It's like high turnover,
Hmm.
really high stress. Um, that I'm lucky enough to have a lot more tools than a lot of people do, whether it be experience or like the educational background or just the whatever processing speed that I've gained from just playing games and thinking about math my whole life.
Hmm.
Um, that it's easier for me than other people.
Right.
And that obviously could be a negative because when I was going through school, there were things that were like very, very easy for me that I never developed that like grindy, hit the books, study mentality
Hmm.
that the really, really successful people have,
Right.
where it's not the people who are easily able to breeze through everything that are the people that are super successful. They're the people that like hit struggles and learned to be better incrementally and were dedicated and worked super hard and eventually sort of like got to the whatever peak they were looking to get to.
Yep.
um i i don't I don't want to talk down to people in education, but I feel like the average high school teacher isn't that, um coming from me.
So they're not the ones who are grinding incrementally. Because I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger when you say that, or I think of David Goggins, right? These people who had to overcome so much adversity to get where they are. But it was the choosing to overcome it every day and face it every day that led to this compounding growth effect over the course of years because they had a very strong vision of who they wanted to be. And they did things that were very hard for them to do. and it got easier over time, but they kept doing it. They didn't give up. Um, or it was easy for people like it was for you. But I guess that brings me to the question of like, what is the hardest thing you've had to do or overcome that you value facing and overcoming?
Um, oh man, like in general, that's a crazy question.
It could be
Um,
parenting, it could be something else.
yeah, I think that the hardest thing that I've ever had to overcome, I I don't think I've quite overcame it.
Okay, you're
I think
still in the
there's
process.
yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I know in my head that I want to do and want to be in the habit of doing,
Hmm.
and sticking to those things on a daily basis are like is absolutely the most challenging thing that I've had to face. Like small things, like eating well,
Hmm.
working out, those habits that you know are going to make you healthier, live longer, make you a better person. Like all of those things that in your head you're like, I want to do that, and you can. But we talked about this earlier. You can get like microbursted into doing it for 2 3 weeks, and then you start to get tired of it. You fall out of your routines.
Hmm.
It's sticking to the good routines that I know that I want, but I haven't been able to master yet. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this as well because sometimes it feels like it can take years for me to turn what seems like a strong motivation and desire, and I don't feel any internal conflict. But clearly, there must be some unconscious part of me that would rather be doing something else because I'm not doing it. I'm not doing those things, right? Um, there's something there, like there's friction, right?
Even if like
Hmm.
even if you've done it for 6 months, 8 months,
Yeah,
like whatever it
it
is.
can
Like
still fall apart.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I hit a point where I was like working out very regularly,
Hmm.
eating super well for an extended period of time. Everything was going great. And then whatever happens, that motivation goes away and it's gone. Like
Hmm.
keeping that incrementally building positive outcomes every day is something that I haven't mastered yet. And
Hmm.
if I could pick like one skill to overcome, it's to make those things consistent.
Hmm.
And that's something that I'm sure that there are people that have mastered that. That are like, I'm going to do the 1% better every day
Hmm.
and all of that. But I've always hit points where the motivation has failed,
Hmm.
sort of fallen back into uh that average way of living, and
Hmm.
all that um positive forward motion gets sort of wiped away. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So YouTube, if anybody has any tips, let me know.
There's a book I want to buy for you and James. I read it and I loved the book. It's called Way of the Warrior Kid, and
Okay.
it's by Jocko Willink. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the ex Marine
ex Navy SEAL.
oh sorry, ex
Yeah.
Navy SEAL,
Hmm.
MMA,
Hmm.
big big guy, has a
Hmm.
podcast. Yes.
Jocko
Um,
podcast. Yep.
yeah, the Jocko way of thinking, like when you listen to Jocko talk,
Hmm.
you're like, yeah, like I want to do that. I want to get on the mat. Like I want to roll. I want to test my manhood versus somebody else. I want to be up at 5 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I want to get at it.
Yeah.
And then like while he's talking, you're like, yeah, I'm sold.
And then
And then
after,
5 in the morning comes, you're like, I want to go back to sleep. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
been my experience with the like Jocko like people, and like I would love to have the mindset to be like, yeah, I'm gonna be combat oriented. Um, I'm gonna go learn and go to the gym and do that. And me testing my abilities against other people is gonna be how I'm gonna do that grind. Um, but that hasn't been me for a really long time.
Hmm.
But yeah, I like to hear him speak. It makes me feel good for the 3.5 minutes that the YouTube clip is on, and then I'm back to normal.
Have you read any of his books?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've listened to his podcast quite a bit.
Mhm.
especially his interviews. Um,
I like his style.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, his style's really good. Um,
Yep.
it's engaging. He has a voice. It's very unique in his perspective, with him being able to like tie in his real life experience with being the leader of a team in the Middle East. And like
Hmm.
you hear those stories where he's like, this is where it was applicable. Here's where this leadership skill was applicable in my real life. This happened where there was sniper fire coming in. You're like, you're hooked.
Hmm.
And um I really enjoy listening to him speak.
Yeah, and I like that he has always done things that if I was doing today, people would tell me you shouldn't do that on your podcast. Like he would read from a book, or he would talk to himself basically, or he'd have echo there constantly. Um, but the reason I recommended, yeah, I'm gonna get you Way of the Warrior Kid. I think you'll like it. I think James will like it.